when a child gets distance from their family or from their parents due to bullying, stigma, not getting adequate support, they can be easily sexually abused, or they can be easily groomed by people outside or inside their family. And in that case, they would never ever come back to you, because in the first place you didn't even support them when they reveal to you about their gender or their sexuality or about their sex. Today we are going to talk about gender, sex, and sexuality, and how it is related to overall development of a child, and how it is also related to child sexual abuse prevention. So a lot of people might feel that gender, sex, sexuality are three different topics, and they might also feel that how can it be related to child sexual abuse? But just to break the ice, that's not true. All these are totally interlinked, and they're directly linked to child sexual abuse. So now let's come to why this particular topic is important. So I'm assuming most of the people here today attending are adults, like it was in the last time when I gave the webinar, and I'm also assuming that a lot of you might be parents as well. So when it comes to topic like gender, sex, and sexuality with respect to children, there are majorly five or six reasons which caters to make this topic very very important. The first reason is when you know knowledge, when you have the knowledge about these particular topics, you are able to support gender expensive children. So what I mean by gender expensive children is uh, children who are not into just two binary roles, that is boy or girl, but they cater to more gender roles. So for example, transgender children or non-binary children. In that case, if you are not you're not available with the entire knowledge of this topic, then there would be a lot of communication, a lot of parenting gap between you and the child. And the child will be really vulnerable to be abused or to be groomed by any person outside your family, or in general, because the child would also be very, very vulnerable because he or she is not getting the support they should get from a parent. So, firstly, is that will be able to support your gender expensive children. Second, preventing harm. It is very very important to understand that of course every child is vulnerable to bullying or grooming or any such physical or online crimes, but when it comes to trans children, they're even more vulnerable because there is a entire euphoria of questions which is left unanswered for them, and they expect us adults and parents to answer that, and when we don't have the equipped knowledge, it is easy for people to easily bully them or groom them, and then they don't get the support from us that we should be giving them. Thirdly, you're not able to openly communicate to them when we are not equipped with such knowledge. For example, especially when I talk about trans children, they have a lot of feelings, concerns, questions, and if we are not able to answer that, it's not going to promote a healthy parent child relationship. Now, fourth, again, it's almost same as preventing harm. That is reducing bullying and stigma. There are a lot of stats and facts, not just in India, all the world, that trans children, are more vulnerable to get bullied or groomed or get stigmatized by children around in their schools, or by the adults, or by the people in their families and all such people. So in that case, it is very important for parents to support them, to advise them, to nurture them, and also to stay behind their back to support them. And for that, you need to know the exact difference between all these topics and all the associated terms. And finally, the most important is to nurture a very positive relationship. We all know that it is not a child or it is not a person's mistake if they're a trans or if they're a cis or if they've chosen any other particular gender role or gender expression. We are going to come to these terms later, but just to tell you guys that a lot of us, have different gender roles, gender expressions. Some of us, like to wear jeans. Some of us like to wear pajamas. So it's totally different. So in that case, we all should have the good knowledge to understand all these things, the relation with all these things, and also the acceptance of a child in their family to nurture a positive relationship. So these are the major reasons, why this topic is very, very important. And just to connect it with child sexual abuse, one simple line would be, when a child, gets distance from their family or from their parents due to bullying, stigma, not getting adequate support, they can be easily sexually abused, or they can be easily groomed by people outside or inside their family. And in that case, they would never ever come back to you, because in the first place, you didn't even support them when they reveal to you about their gender or their sexuality or about their sex. So it is very important that we all understand these things, so that we can also protect our children from sexual abuse as well. So this was the entire vibe of the session, and now I'll pass on this to the Rudrakshi.
So today we'll be talking about gender, sex, and sexuality. And there are two very common things that I hear when this topic is brought up. One is that gender, sex, and sexuality are pretty much the same thing, and it is just a fancy term for the same thing in the end of the day, which is not true. And the second thing is that it is usually used for people who belong to the LGBTQ plus community, and it is not for people who are normal or heteronormative people. Again, not true. Gender, sex, and sexuality are three completely different things. But the beautiful thing is they are interlinked with one another so beautifully that it helps you understand a lot more about yourself and about people around you. So it is a form of identity that you have that helps you understand how you see things and how other people see you. So it not just helps you understand about yourself, but also about people around you, which is very important to build connections and how you form relationships further on. I've been working with children for quite some time now, and I've realized that majority of the children do not know anything about their private parts. And when you try to speak to them, there is a lot of hesitancy and resistance because they feel like it is a very shameful topic. It is something that they should be embarrassed about, or they get very angry when you discuss this, because maybe that is how their parents reacted to it when they tried to ask questions about this thing. And it's very sad to see, because if children don't know about their private parts, they're very susceptible to sexual abuse, as mentioned by Rahul. And that is a thing that we try to destigmatize when we take sessions at Bachpan. And hence the topic is very, very, very important to us. So we'll start by talking about sex. Sex is basically more of a medical terminology. So sex is usually given to you by a doctor or a medical healthcare professional when you're born, based on your anatomical or physiological aspects. That means they will look at your genitalia or your private parts, to simplify, and if they see a penis, they will call you a male, or if they see a labia or a vulva, which is a female private part, they will call you a female. And that is pretty much it. But sometimes what can happen is when a child is born, the child may not give you clear-cut signs of a male or a female private part. That means that the child may have both, or child may have neither. And it can be very confusing for a doctor to classify them into a male or a female. So at that given point of time, your doctor may call your child an intersex child. And an intersex child would be someone that does not fall into either or categories. This can be very stressful for the parent if they don't know what an intersex child means, because whenever a child is born, the first thing that people ask you is, oh, is it a boy or a girl? And when you tell people that your child is an intersex child, they can act like your child is very alienated or very freaky, and the child might receive hate before they even know what they are. Which can be very de-stressing to the parents also. And intersex individuals are also sometimes called as hermaphrodites, but we don't refer to that term now. We usually call them, in medical terms at least, as disorders of sexual development. And you might feel like intersex people must be so rare, like something you must not even have heard of. But intersex people or intersex children are 1 in 1,500 births. Which can tell you that it is much more common than twin pregnancies also. So intersex people, you may not know them like in person, but you must have encountered them at some point in your life for sure. That is how common they are. Now, the thing is, like I mentioned before, it can be very de-stressing to the parent. So when you tell someone that your child is an intersex baby, you might receive a lot of hate as it is. So the parents have an inherent need to fix the child. That means they will go to their doctor and they will ask the doctor to fix the child. That means make the child either a male or a female. And when that happens, there can be two things that the doctor can do. One is based on other aspects. They might decide if the child should be turned into a male or a female, or the doctor might take the baby's DNA and will decide based on the DNA. That means if the baby has an XX gene, that means the baby is a female by genetic basis, and if the baby is an XY, that means the baby is a male. And based on that, the doctor might have a gender changing surgery on the baby during infancy in itself. That means in very, very early childhood of the baby. And so there is one major problem with this. And you will, to be able to understand that, I need to share an image with you. The thing that you need to know is whenever a fetus or a baby is in the womb, every child is a female. So in order for that child to turn into a male, you need special signals, and only after that that child will turn into a male. So in general, every child is a female. So towards your left, you will see what looks like a very typical female private part, and towards your right, you will see what is a very typical male private part. Now, what can happen is this is the clitoris, and this is the labia, which is the thick skin fold that women have. So when development happens, this clitoris is the one that turns into a female. So as you can see, there is a swelling-like thing that happens, and which eventually turns into a penis. And the labia majora that you see, the thick skin folding that you have, this swells up and this thins a little bit, which is thicker in female. It thins a little bit and turns into a scrotum. And this is where the testes is present. Now, what can happen is when we think of external genitalia or private parts, we either think extreme left or extreme right. That means proper female or proper male in this case. But many a times, there are many individuals that are stuck in the between. That means they don't fall into either spectrum. And this is what we called as intersex individuals. So what can happen is when there is a child that is stuck in between, if the doctor decides to turn this child into a female, it is relatively easier, because what the doctor has to do is just cut out excess parts and stitch it up a little bit, make it tighter, and it will resemble a female-like genitalia. But what will happen is when the doctor has decided to turn the child into a male child, it is much more difficult, because the doctor will need extra tissue, extra muscle to be able to turn this into a penis-like structure. And even despite doing that, now, since this is an artificially constructed thing and it is not naturally present in the body, the penis will be there during infancy or during early childhood. But when the child grows up, when the child attains puberty, the body will grow, but the penis will not grow, since it is artificially constructed according to the child's age when the child was a child during infancy. So when the baby grows up, when the intersex baby grows up after having a gender changing surgery, he might feel very abnormal or have a lot of curiosity around his private parts. And as you know, in general, in India, especially, talking about private parts is such a taboo topic. If you were to ask these questions to his parents or even to his friends, they might feel very weirded out as to why they're discussing these things in general, because it is so weird to talk about these things, right? And that can be very, very stressful to the child. The child may not understand what is happening to his body. Is this how naturally bodies grow? Am I the only abnormal one? And God forbid, if the topic of intersex is introduced to the child during adolescence, the trauma that the child might have as to how abnormal I am. I'm not like my friends. I had a surgery to have a private parts, whereas they already had one normally. Must be so stressful to the child. And that is the whole thing around intersex individuals, is that there is a lot of stigma around it, and it is viewed as a very abnormal thing, whereas it is not. So when an intersex individual is born, there can be two things. One is it can be normal, and the second thing is it can be associated with other disorders. So what usually happens is the testes of a male is usually grown inside the abdomen when the baby is inside the womb, and it comes outside in the scrotum that we saw in the image at the end of the 9th month. So what can happen is when the baby is born preterm, or if the baby is premature, the testes must not have come outside. And so if it did not come outside the body, it might look or resemble like a female genitalia, but might also be with a penis. So again, confusing for the doctor. So the doctor may term it as intersex baby. And usually when this happens, the doctor usually gives a waiting period of maybe 6 months or 1 year to see how the child develops after it is born. And based off of that, most of the times the child develops normally. The testes descend and it resembles like a male genitalia and everything is fine. But many a times that doesn't happen. And that is where the thing about changing surgeries come into the picture. Uh, Without a doubt, sex changing surgery is not ethical. It is not right because you are deciding the child's sex when the child is just an infant. And it is not fair to the child. And that is why there was an amazing step taken by Madras High Court where they banned compulsory sex changing surgeries right in infancy. They have urged that these surgeries should happen when the child reaches at least adolescence, where the child tries to understand what he or she is, how he or she wants to be viewed, and how they want to express themselves when they reach adulthood. That is one thing. And other reason for intersex children can be they can be associated with certain disorders. There are many reasons why there can be intersex children. There can be some hormonal issues. There can be tumors that the mother might have, which may influence the development in the child when the child is present in the womb. There can be certain genetic disorders that may be present. But either or, I don't think that just being an intersex individual should cause so much harm to the patient as a whole. They are individuals at the end of the day, and they should be viewed as such. Just because their gender or their sex doesn't fit into either or categories, they shouldn't receive the trauma that they do at the end of the day. Can I take questions at the end of the session? Okay. Okay, excellent. So speaking of the why of the session in terms of sex, it is very important for people to know what it is. Just like I highlighted before, it is so common. It is more common than seeing twin births. It is more common than seeing triplet births. And we must have all seen people, twins in our lives. So you can imagine how many intersex people you must have encountered in your life. It is important to have healthy conversations around this because immediately, if you don't know about these things, the first notion is that something is wrong with me. Another thing why this is important, and in many cultures, this is seen as a sign of black magic or a curse that the child is bringing to the family, which is very obviously not true. It is just a developmental delay or a developmental abnormality sometimes. But in terms of that, we don't have to look at it as something that should be fixed, rather something that should be embraced in the child. And that is the need for this thing in particular. Next, we'll be talking about is gender. Gender is not so technical. Gender is more of something that you see in yourself. So what is gender? Gender is basically a societal norm that has decided what is female or what is male like. And this can be in terms of many different things. It can be in terms of the way you dress, your hairstyle, your hobbies, your mannerisms, like the way you sit, eat, talk, etc. And most importantly, your pronouns. That is what gender is like. So in gender also, we have two categories. We have gender expression and we have gender identity. So gender identity is basically how I see myself. And gender expression is how I choose to show myself to the world. Again, might sound similar, but very different things, because for most people, it is the same. Like for instance, I am a female, I look at myself as a female and I choose to express myself in stereotypical female-like characteristics. But for most people, that is not true. They may be different. And again, that is why it is important for us to know. So even under gender, we have cisgender, we have transgender, and then we have non-binary. So in cisgender, we have, I will take my example again. I was assigned female at birth and I recognize with the gender female. That means female-like characteristics. So I choose to dress like a female. I express myself like a female, and I use the pronouns she, her that are female pronouns. So that is cisgender. Transgender is someone that may be assigned a particular sex at birth. I will take female for example, but when they grow up later on, they realize that they identify more with the other sex, and they feel like they feel more male-like, and they don't associate with the sex that they were provided at birth. Transgender people usually might also feel like they are trapped in a body that does not feel like their own. Their private parts feel very repulsive to them. They feel the urge to get rid of them. And that is a common term that we come across when we come across transgender people. And then we have last, which is non-binary. Non-binary people don't associate themselves with either or. That means male or female. And either they can come somewhere in between on the spectrum, or they just don't associate at all with either of these terms. That is one. And the other thing is gender fluidity, where gender fluid people might feel more female-like during sometimes, and may feel more masculine on other times. And they keep switching between these because that is how they feel like, based on the circumstance or situation. They might switch to one, or they might keep switching between either or these roles.